The sponsor for today's podcast is Repower Daily Electrolytes. Hello, I'm Kieran O'Connor and welcome back to the Calculated Risks podcast. Today we are joined by Justin Pike, the CEO and founder of Burbank Software. Justin has built, scaled and sold several businesses, which I'm sure we'll cover today, and he's been directly involved in some of the most transformative payment and authentication solutions that you may or may not be aware of. Hello, Justin. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here.
I've been looking forward to this one, so we're going to get straight into it.
Good.
Before I start, here's a copy of my book, which I
Thank you
give
very much.
to everyone. I'm sure that can collect some dust on a shelf somewhere. And of course, we've got our new sponsor's gift. So there's some electrolytes there and a very expensive bottle for you to take away after.
Is it gin?
Sadly not. No, that's the next sponsor. Anyone
Okay,
watching?
good.
That's the next sponsor. First question. I'd love to hear the answer to this. You get varied answers. So the first risk you ever took professionally, how big was it at the time and how did it turn out?
The biggest risk, number of risks over the years, the biggest risk professionally was probably with MyPinPad, which was my second company, where we had invented a way to turn retailers' mobile phones into payment devices. So what you take for granted now next door, myself and my team actually invented that. The very first meeting I had was at Paddington Station in London at the Hilton with a member of PCI, which is the standards body for the financial institution. And it didn't go very well. We just raised some money and they said, you'll never put a PIN number into a phone. You can't do this through software alone. You can't put bank PIN numbers into something that's not hardware secured with meshing and special encryption chips. So that was a bit of a kick in the guts. But we persevered, we carried on, we invented the standards, we worked for years going through the labs. And eventually 3 years later, we had a standard that we invented. So that was probably the biggest risk, first risk.
Yeah, so some people could easily take that rejection as, maybe it's time to move on. If they're the governing body, then, maybe it's not right, but you carried on.
Yes,
Yeah, nice.
Perseverance.
Yeah, good. Why do you think that is? Why do you think they said it would never work? Was it too transformational?
It was too transformational. Up until that point, you could only put your PIN number, which is something that is highly secure and only you know. And in a financial transaction, it shifts the liability. So it's a very sensitive thing. To be able to put it into a mobile phone off the shelf, just with a bit of software on, was just unheard of.
And now it's taken for granted, right?
Now it's taken for granted.
Yeah. And now a message from our sponsor, Repower Daily Electrolytes. Picture this, you're in the middle of a busy day, work deadlines, family chaos, but without realizing it, your brain is running on empty. Just a 1% drop in hydration can tank your focus, reaction time, even your mood. That's why Repower Daily Electrolytes created the ultimate hydration formula. Packed with the right electrolytes your brain craves. Forget plain water. Level up your energy, sharpen your mind, and feel alive again. Stay sharp, stay strong, and hydrate smarter with Repower Daily Electrolytes. And you can use our code PLACE10 to get 10% off your first order. Let's fast forward to your here you are today.
Yep.
What's your risk tolerance like now, and how adverse are you to taking small or big risks?
Hope my wife's not listening. My risk tolerance is probably a bit higher because yet again with Burbank, we're in the position again whereby we're told you can't do that. We had the same with my last company as well, MYHSM. You can't do that. So I've never shied away from a challenge. The rules, my view is, if the rules don't exist, create them or bend the existing rules to do what you want to do. And as long as you believe in what you want to do, then you'll achieve it. So we're kind of back to where we was back at the start again, but obviously with a lot of lessons learned over the years to get us to this point, and a lot of knowledge of the industry and a certain degree, a lot of respect of the industry as well. So it was a little bit easier, but still a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing about hindsight, right? The challenges that were so big at the time, you've overcome them already, like the one at Paddington Station. So why can't you do it again with something else like Burbank?
Correct. I mean, one little story is when I had a meeting with one of the financial schemes not long after the meeting I had with PCI. And the gentleman who was running the scheme at the time actually interrupted my meeting with some people there and said, never in my lifetime will you put a PIN into a mobile phone. Just over 3 years later, when PCI launched the standard in Barcelona, I made sure I was sat next to him in the audience.
Did he have anything to say?
Not a lot.
That's a good story. I like that. Yeah. So we had some chat off camera, and I know you lived in Australia for a while. You left university and went straight to starting a business, which is quite interesting. Lots of our listeners are maybe around the younger age who are either in university, first time employed, or looking at starting a business. So just talk me through that story there. So what did you study in university, and then what happened when you left?
So I done, at the time, it was computing and artificial intelligence at University of Glamorgan. Nothing like artificial intelligence is today, completely different. I took a year out of my studies to go across to Melbourne with somebody on my course, take a gap year. 6 weeks into being there, the company that we went to work for went bust, which was difficult, being the other side of the world. So we started our own software company. We had a really good life for 12 months. We decided to come back home. We tossed a coin, it went wrong. We come back home, finished our degrees. And then I met through, at the time, the Welsh Government, WDA. I met a colleague who turned out to be my first business partner, Anthony Hines, who was across looking at some telco work. And we got talking, and then I moved to Australia. And then that led to 6 months later, we founded what was my first company called Enet, which was a payment processor in the travel industry. Actually, it was the world's largest payments processor in the travel industry.
So just to go back on what you mentioned there, so you started a company for 12 months, flipped a coin, and it didn't work out. Go into a bit more detail there.
So so there's a place in Perth, you might know it, Kings Park, and there's a wishing well at the top. And we had to decide whether to come home or not. We had a great life. We was earning great money. We was in the sun. Whether we come back or not to finish our degrees. So we tossed a coin, and it came up tails instead of heads. So 6 weeks later, we came home.
And that was it? You put that big decision in the power of a coin?
Yep.
I respect that.
Yep.
Nice. So you come back, and then that short story there, eNett International. That was with Anthony Hines?
Anthony Hines, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that business. Where did the idea come from to start that at such a young age?
So I did a lot of work as well in the telco industry. So I did a lot of work previously when prepaid mobile phones. So I had one of the first top-up solutions in the UK where you could put money into like an ATM, and it would vend a £10 voucher, a £5 voucher. Did a lot of work on that. We moved to Australia to promote that in Australia. We met some people from MasterCard. We tried to get a project off the ground in Australia, kind of doing the same thing. This is when phones had buttons, so many, many years ago. But there was some issues with the mobile networks and the technology used, so we couldn't launch it. And we got introduced to a guy at the tennis, the Melbourne Open. They were from a hotel chain in the US. And they were telling us about problems that they were having moving money. It was very inefficient. So we looked to adapt the technology that we kind of went across there with for this mobile phone solution. And we came up with a way to move money efficiently between travel agencies and suppliers and airlines.
So that stemmed off a meeting with a hotel chain?
Correct.
Nice. Okay, so you initially provided a solution for one customer,
correct,
which worked, and then replicated that across more hotel chains, I imagine.
And it was tough. So if you're in Australia, unlike the UK, there's not many large chains of in the UK, you have TUI, for instance, that own the airline, they own the hotels, they own everything. Then Australia is a lot of independent travel agencies. So when you go in and you buy a package holiday, you pay your £2,000, but that will consist of a number of items. You have the flight, you have the taxes, you might have the parking, you have the transfer, you have the hotel. So travel agencies have to pay airlines maybe via check. They have to pay the hotels overseas via TT. Net result is they were paying about $1,500 a week at the time in bank fees. And there was a risk for airlines and everybody else. So we proposed that Enet was a solution where they tell us who they want to pay, and then every day we would go in, we would take one amount of money out of their account. Didn't cost them anything. And we would make the payments on their behalf. So we would then go to Qantas, for instance, and we would say to Qantas, okay, here's one amount of money that represents the payments for all of the travel agencies in Australia today, and provide them with all the software to break that down into individual payments. So that's how we started.
Yeah. So would someone have been unhappy with that because they would have been losing some money off the top from transactions?
Not so much, there wasn't so much fraud, but it was the problem, the risk for the airlines was that travel agencies used to hang on, because you might not book your holiday for 6 months' time. They would hang on to money for 6 months, supposedly put it in a trust account, but they might go bust. The airline has issued the tickets, so it was a problem. All they really cared about was their commission that they were getting from the sale. So Enet essentially sped things up. So we said to the airlines, we'll give you the money overnight as long as you promise to pay back the commission overnight. And that's how it started. And then it grew.
Yeah, okay. And how long did you run the business for?
I'm running it. So Anthony was CEO. I developed all the technology. I was there. I was commuting from Wales to Melbourne for a couple of years. My wife then got pregnant with my first child. My wings were clipped. So I kind of stepped back from Enet about 7-8 years in.
Yeah, okay. So I love the story about you almost proposing a solution around one hotel chain's problem. Most people we speak to say, like, go speak to customers, find out what the pain point is, and almost tailor it around them. At one point in the business, did you realize we're onto something here? Like we could make something big?
It was the sheer uptake of the product. I remember our first payments, which were just a couple of $1,000, and in the end, we were processing tens of billions every year. Enet grew to be the largest processor in the travel industry. Processed for Booking.com, was acquired by WEX just after COVID. Not the best time to sell a travel business. But yeah, and operates in 45 countries around the world. Still operating today under the WEX umbrella.
That's incredible. And in terms of like headcount for a business like that, to go from a couple of £1,000 a week to billions, how quickly were you scaling?
It took quite a while, quite slow at the start, because we had to do a lot of integrations into the GDS systems that run all the airline ticketing systems. But then the last couple of years of the business, when after I sort of actively stepped back, it really started to grow substantially, because there was more and more fraud. The travel industry is rife with fraud, and Enet solved a lot of that as well.
That's incredible. Was there any competitors after you tried to copy and replicate what you did?
There's a number of companies out there now that kind of they do similar things, but Enet was the first, and Enet was the biggest, and I believe still remains the biggest.
In terms of like raising capital for that business, did you raise any, or did you manage to do that all yourself?
No, we raised from people that I knew actually in the UK. So we raised an initial $500,000 to get some concepts up and going, build the initial systems, and then obviously over the years there was tens of millions poured in by MasterCard and other people as well.
Yeah. So when you raised that first $500,000, if you don't mind, how old are you?
24, 23, 24.
That sounds like a lot of money for a 24-year-old to come in and have that in their account, the business account, right? How do you work out where to deploy that cash at that age?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we had some good people around us at Enet. Anthony had a business before, so he was no stranger to it. It was my first at scale. But yeah, you just have to surround yourself with smart people that know what they're doing. We had some really good people around us. We had really good investors, to be fair, that allowed us access to not just money, but their network, and if you get the right investors, it's much more than just money.
Yeah, networks, advice, knowledge,
Absolutely.
Wisdom, more importantly. And at what point did you realize that you wanted to scale and sell the business, and it could be acquired?
It was. I said I actively stepped back from the company when my daughter was born. So by the time it was sold, I'd already founded my second business, which was MyPinPad, which is another interesting story. But yeah, like I said, I'd already kind of taken a step back actively from because it's just not possible to commute every week to Melbourne.
It sounds nice going to Melbourne often, but that plane journey is quite takes it out of you.
It's all downhill. That's the only positive side.
Yeah, I suppose so.
But it's uphill all the way back.
Yeah. And were you involved in? You said you
Moved
away from the company throughout the exit process, so you weren't involved in terms
No,
of
I
negotiations?
wasn't involved in that at all. I was, still a shareholder, but not actively involved at that point.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned MyPinPad was the next company. How did you? That's for everyone that doesn't know. I'm aware of MyPinPad, great company in Cardiff. What did MyPinPad? What problem did it solve?
I'd found a way to input numbers into a mobile phone without the mobile phone knowing what was inputted. And because of my financial background, we were lucky at Enet that we had I had a bird's eye view down through the schemes and the financial system, so I knew exactly what problems that could solve. So we did some initial patents, come back very positive. Again, we sought from friends. We sought initial $500,000 to take it to market. Rough start in terms of PCI and the scheme saying, look, you can't do that. We then went through lab after lab after lab, so security labs to try and do penetration testing to break the system. No lab could. So after kind of 12 months, Visa Card and MasterCard started to take us seriously. So we worked with them, and they developed a set of standards to do some pilots, which we did with Utimaco in Paris. And then 18 months later, PCI picked up the work and published a standard called Spock, which there's now several iterations of that now. So the original version, you had a little dongle that you used to have to put the card in, put the PIN number into the retailer's mobile phone. Then that went to CPOC, which is contactless, where you just tap the card against the phone. Now it's MPOC, which is a souped up version of CPOC, essentially.
It seems to come natural to you, like the industry that you're in right now, of all the time you spent. But can you think about where did that idea come from? When did you realise that this is actually going to be transformational?
It was quite by accident. I was trying to do something on my phone, and I had a grid of numbers, and it was a hot summer's day, and I didn't perfectly align the grid of numbers over the dialer that I was doing, and I pressed 4 and 7 went into the phone. And I thought, okay, there's something in this, and that's where the idea came from.
From something as small as that, you've created a multi-million-dollar company.
Yeah. So then, kind of that afternoon and the following afternoon, sat at the computer making little paper templates to try different things out, and that formed the seed of the initial patent. So even though your brain thinks that you've put in 1, 2, 3, 4, the phone is convinced that you've put in 6, 7, 4, 2. And then the MyPinPad technology was all built on top of that, and all the patents, 164 in total, were all built around that initial idea.
So to simplify that for anyone listening or watching, where would they have used MyPinPad software?
So MyPinPad is used now. It's the largest provider of softPOS, which is what the technology is called. You can use it in the market next door. Plumbers use it. It's built into banks' computers, mobile banking apps. So you can use it tens of thousands of locations around the world.
So pretty much everyone's going to be using that at some point throughout a day or their week.
It has. I mean, if you're a small plumber or you're a small cafe, you don't want to buy, especially if you're mobile, you don't buy a device these days. And they've changed these days. They used to be, you have to sign up, for a 3-year contract with the bank, and the likes of PayPal and SumUp and Izettle changed that with the smaller devices. But people still want, especially in countries like India and other countries around the world, where even £50 to buy one of these devices is a lot of money. So that's where they've seen the biggest growth in this. But in the UK, like I said, there's places next door that use it in the market, food courts.
I bet that's a good feeling.
Yeah. I never seen it live, believe it or not, until about a year ago in Abergavenny in the market, shopping with my wife.
And that was the first time?
Because it was always deployed in other countries around the world. Never deployed at the time before I left MyPinPad in the UK.
I want to touch on the patents. We've not had anyone on the podcast that has gone through, any, I don't think, but definitely not that many. How How difficult or easy was it to go through a patent process? Number one, the first time, I imagine that might have been complex, but how's that been, the 100th time?
Still complex.
Yeah.
It's you have to have. I mean, I have a great patent attorney that I've worked with, Kerry Ann, for 12 years. So you have to find a really good patent attorney. There's lots out there, but all covering different areas. Be it automotive, be it mechanical, be it medical. I was obviously software and bank grade. Kerry Ann's fantastic, but it's still hard. Patent process is you file your initial patent, then the examiner looks at it over the course of kind of 6-7 months, and then comes back with similar patents. Then you have to prove to the examiner why yours is different, and it's hard. They are typically long technical documents. They are written in such a way it's very difficult to understand. So when I go through a patent, I have to lock myself away in a room and not be interrupted, because if you're halfway through a chain of thought and then you have to do something else, you have to restart. It is tough. It is tough.
And what's the duration it would take typically for someone to put the request in and then get it finalized, payment done? You've got the patent.
Patents. We still have patents at MyPinPad that were filed 12 years ago. That's never been granted yet.
Not rejected.
Not rejected, just not granted.
Wow.
Because there's delays and stack of papers this big in patent offices around the world. It can take, some countries can be really quick, other countries can take 10 years plus.
How many have you done in total?
We filed across 7 families. We filed 100, excluding Burbank, 162, 164.
Wow.
Across 7 different patent families covering hardware, software.
Yeah. I hope I'm able to ask this question. Have you ever has anyone ever copied the product and you've relied on the patent to hold you up in a court of law potentially?
We had, yes. There was a company that was bought by a mobile phone manufacturer that people would know. That's bought a company that were infringing our patents, and we took the mobile phone company on then essentially and overturned the patents.
Was that like a draining process? Did that take its toll?
It took its toll, and it was expensive, but it was worthwhile.
Yeah, and that's the only one?
That's the only one.
Good innings.
That's the only one.
Yeah. Let's go back to MyPinPad then. So you founded £500,000 through friends and family?
Just friends.
Friends.
Investors.
Yeah.
That I knew.
Let's walk through that journey, because that's a great story. Huge company in Cardiff, employed some great people, a real figure of payments for South Wales. Who was the founding team? And talk to me about the first couple of years of MyPinPad.
So the founding team was myself. Founded a company. I had a colleague of mine, David Muxworthy, at the start. I then brought in some people that I knew from Enet, old CEO that was at Enet and chairman. Eventually relocated from Australia to the UK, and found some really good local developers that were kind of with me from kind of month 2, month 3. And one thing we always do is any advice is always get the best people that you can. Always get a good team. You're only as good as the team around you. And we learned, we grew up, we made the mistakes together, and what worked, what didn't work. Iterations of capital raise again and again and again. I mean, I think today that it's up to about 45 million investment into the company, and still going. So like I said, MyPinPad grew. It operates now in 29 countries globally. It's the largest provider of soft POS globally. Provides tier 1 banks as well as small merchants and everything in between.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned get the best people around you, it sounds obvious, but it's the right thing to do, but sometimes hard. Typically when startups are in that first couple of years, it's they're not financially in a good place, so they can't pay a lot. How have you attracted the best people over your career? What have you done?
Everyone, same with Burbank now. Everybody, and the same with Enet, we always made them a shareholder of the company. So they always have a vested interest. So
is that at all levels?
At all levels, everybody.
there will be some people who financially benefited from MyPinPad and Enet at software engineer level.
Correct.
Yeah.
Everybody was a shareholder.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Which is important to get them feeling part of the journey.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. And for the rest of the journey in MyPinPad, then when was the first big raise?
First big raise was about 2-3 years in after we'd secured the standards. We then did a big raise to start to scale. The problem in the financial industry is takes a long time. Everything takes years to a lot longer than any other industry. Lab tests, and you have to go through all the schemes and PCI, and if you think it takes 1 year, it takes 3. If you think it takes 1 million, it takes 5. That's just the nature of the financial industry.
Yeah. And when you went to raise that first amount of money, can you remember what sort of revenue you were doing as a company?
Nothing for years.
Really?
Nothing for years. But it was the belief of the investors early days that this technology will change the world, and it has.
It did, yeah. Were you the front man when raising investment? Were you in there with the investors talking about the storytelling, where this is going to go?
I'm always a front man in terms of, because everybody wants to meet the founder and the developer of the tech. So it's always, even with Burbank, it's always been me. But then obviously behind me is probably a team better than me that actually know the low-level coding. We had some great people at MyPinPad. Everybody's at Burbank at Burbank now is ex-MyPinPad. So the people have followed me from company to company, which is good.
Yeah, that's always a good sign.
Yeah.
When going to those investors for the first big raise at MyPinPad, then what was the appetite like from them? Was there a lot of competition?
No, you had some large companies at the time doing. You had Jack Dorsey's Square, which was a company in. Jack Dorsey founded Twitter, his other Square, a payment company. They were doing it kind of over the pond in a different area, but they wasn't doing PIN, so we'd invented the PIN element to it that allowed the technology to go to the next level and go through the contactless barrier. So yeah, it's raising capital is always hard. Always get more than you need. Always plan it's going to take at least twice as long. Yeah, that's the most sound advice I can give anybody.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely understand about the planning for it taking longer.
Yeah,
we've worked with some companies who expect it by a certain time, and
and get the. I mean, go with your gut with the investors. I mean, we've had good investors. We've had some really bad investors. There's obviously different investors for different stages of the businesses. One end you got large PE companies, then you got smaller angel investors, seed investors for different stages. So it's always good. Ultimately, you have to bond with the investor, and it's not just about money. It's about the network. It's about what more they can bring as well, what doors they can open, and what knowledge they can, kind of impart to you.
Yeah. So for anyone who's going through investment like that, trying to raise some capital, do you think it's appropriate to push back on that and say, what else you bring to the table outside of the financial? Would that be expected for the investors to bring that to the table anyway?
Absolutely. You have to. I mean, you have to. It's not just about the money, and if they're looking to invest in you, you also need to know what they're going to do for you as well, more than just the money. I mean, money is harder to raise in today's climate. But if and investors, obviously, there's different investors for different industries. But if you get an investor interested, or a number of investors hopefully interested in your particular business and sector, they're as much on the interview table as you. It works both ways. Both ways.
So you said you raised a total of 45 million for MyPinPad?
MyPinPad has raised, 45 million to date. It's doing another raise now.
And what series have you gone started at? Pre-seed, I imagine, for the 500,000. Where are you at right now?
Yeah, it's I don't know what letter of the alphabet it would be now.
Yeah, that many.
Yeah, I was. I don't know where it is now. I'm obviously Burbank now, not MyPinPad, so I stepped away just after COVID to take the technology to the next level of what we have, which no doubt we'll come on to in a minute.
Yeah.
Another interesting story. kind of started again. But this time it's a different ballgame again.
In terms of the investment you've raised throughout your career, what's been the hardest stage to convince, persuade people that you should be buying into this?
The very first amount of money at Enet was the hardest because we're unknown. Whereas with Burbank, I had a name in the industry. People knew me from MyPinPad, from MYHSM, from Enet. So it gets easier as you go on. Still hard.
Yeah.
Still have to have a good product. Product that it's always good to have a product that solves a problem rather than it's looking for a solution type of thing. It does get easier, but it's still hard. It still takes a lot of time,
especially in today's market. The last couple of years have been very tough.
Yes, yeah. Correct.
Before we jump on the Burbank software, I want to touch on the Enet and the MyPinPad. Like in hindsight, and all the years you've had in between, is there anything that you would have done completely different?
Apart from looking at hiring some different people at different stages, probably not. Everything is kind of everything has worked out well up to where we are now.
That's good. I suppose a better question then on that answer is there anything that you've taken from Enet that you learned to Burbank and you've implemented exactly the same?
From Enet to Burbank, good investors. Always pick good investors. So Enet, we had some really good investors. And Burbank, we have some really good investors. So that's key. That's key. And your team is key as well. Always surround yourself with really good people that you trust.
And I suppose it's a bit different now when you're looking and vetting investors. But how did you go about finding the Burbank team of investors?
We, through Mike Donovan that you've met, Mike used to work for Deloitte, also then used to work for Family Office. So I went to Mike 3 years ago now, and I'd known Mike prior to Burbank. And he said, look, I have this idea. I want to take this to the next level. It intrigued Mike. Mike spoke to some investors. The investors spoke to investors, and it then becomes a domino effect. And then we had kind of 4 months of constant interviews, and we was in the fortunate position where we could pick our investors. We was very well oversubscribed on the round, so we could handpick the investors that we actually wanted and trusted.
I bet that's a wonderful feeling because it's quite rare to hear that where you're oversubscribed, especially in today's market, and you're almost interviewing them probably a little bit more than they're interviewing you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the investors that we have now, we bonded personally. I kind of had a really good feeling and bonded with from the very first call. I remember with Maro, we were with Manuel the very first call. I remember Ruth the very first call, and it was the right questions. It was the right attitude. And then subsequent calls then, just got better and better and better.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. I just want to dig on that a little bit deeper. I'm obsessed with people analytics and first impressions and all that sort of stuff. So you said that they made a very good impression from the first call, and one of the reasons was because of the questions that they were asking.
Yes.
Anything else? Wait, what do you mean when you say attitude?
It was very much. They knew they'd invested previously in the financial industry, so they knew the challenges. They knew the timing. We had bad investors in some companies over the years where they don't really know the industry. They put money in and they expect a 3-year return. It's in the financial industry. Everything takes a lot longer, and then things can turn, the other way. But these knew the industry. They're patient capital as well, and very deep pockets to support the company going forwards in whatever we want to do. And it was that belief in myself, the team, and the product right from the start, which is why we gravitated towards those investors.
Yeah, that's good. You found that from the very first call as well, straight away.
Straight away.
Gut feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, so for anyone that doesn't know, CPOI, card present over internet.
Well done.
I've had a explanation. I've almost seen the product live, and I think it's incredible from the minute I first seen it. So explain it how you would explain it, and let's explain it for like a 5-year-old.
Okay, so when chip and pin technology today is everybody in the world knows how to pay with their card and pin. It's universal. So if you're buying a pint of milk, you tap your card, you enter your PIN number if needed. Everybody has a card, everybody has a PIN, and everybody trusts it. When you shop online, completely different. That's called card not present. Card present when you shop face-to-face, card not present when you shop online. The problem with card not present transactions is that because the retailer or the bank or the acquirer never sees the physical card, they can't verify that it's the physical card. They just see a number, which somebody could have bought off the dark web. And they're readily available on the dark web en masse. If I know where to look, I can probably buy your credit card details and make a purchase without you knowing.
There's not enough money on there, so
Well,
sadly,
yeah.
Justin.
Small
Have you
purchase then.
rejected. Yeah.
Small purchase. Buy a pint of milk.
Yeah.
So the risk profile between the two is very different. Plus, people store card details online as well, which forever and a day we're hearing about cyber attacks and credit card details being stolen, and then identities being cloned, and people being subject to fraud, and for the merchant as well, it's very expensive to sell things on the internet as well. So if I'm selling, say, a mobile phone, £1,000 face-to-face, the bank charges me a percentage of the transaction. So face-to-face, simplicity's sake, that'll be 1%, because categorically it's keying in the transaction, because the bank have verified his card when you put it in the terminal, and we know it's you from your PIN number. So categorically it's you. Online, however, it's just a number. And like I said, I could have bought your number online. So the risk profile is different. So the bank subsequently charges the merchant more money to sell that product online, typically double, and in some countries around the world, treble, if not more. So it could be 2%, 2.5%, 3%. The issue as well with the transaction is when you do a face-to-face transaction, as soon as you enter your PIN number, the liability in that transaction moves to your bank. So it moves away from the merchant, the seller. Online, I could sell a phone online. The order comes through as approved. I ship the phone out. 2 weeks later, you come back from holiday, think this wasn't me. You contact your bank. The bank comes straight back to me as the seller, and they take the £1,000 back off me, because the liability of the transaction stays with the seller. So all of a sudden now I've lost £2,000. I've lost the phone, and I've lost the money, and they have to pay all the costs for the schemes, for the chargeback and everything else. So fraud is the number one issue, and it's called a chargeback for merchants online. What we do with CPOI, we actually, the opposite of MyPinPad, where MyPinPad converts a merchant's mobile phone into a payment device. What we do with CPOI and Burbank is we actually convert your mobile phone into the merchant's device at the point of checkout. So if you're buying something from booking.com, you're booking a flight to the US, when you come to check out, you tap your card against your phone and enter your PIN number as if you was in a booking.com shop. So the liability shifts away from booking.com onto your issuing bank. Because it's classed as card present, the rates are a lot lower. There's no chance of fraud. That is CPOI in a nutshell. So it's bringing the universal chip and pin payment system that everybody knows, but it's bringing it to internet shopping. So there's no change in user behavior needed.
Wow. The last thing you said, just so I'm on the same page as you. So you still have to have the card with you.
Correct.
You tap it to the phone, and then your PIN will show up.
Yes.
Okay. What happens if someone doesn't have their card present?
So version 2, we're working with wallets. So latter part of this year is to integrate the technology so that you can use Apple Pay, Google Pay, any of the pays as they're called online, and use a virtual card that's stored for the same effect.
Wow.
But actually, this is a people think that and we heard this a lot as well from investors at the start, but when you ask consumers actually prefer a little bit of friction in the payments experience. They don't want to just look at their phone and £1,000 is gone from their account. They want to do a positive action to physically do something before it's transferred so that they're in control. So would my daughter, if she's buying some merch from some hoodie for somebody or other, she's gone to the website, it's asking her to tap her card because you can't pay via Apple Pay or Google Pay, would she abandon the sale? No, she'd go and get her card because she wants to make the sale.
And customers prefer that little bit of friction, you found out.
Customers prefer that, especially if people of a certain generation as well. They prefer to do something, to have a positive action to make money. And let's be fair, it's only the same as when you go down the shop. You know, it's the same thing. People do it every day.
Yeah, I think that's where Amazon have made it too easy. You don't even have to add it to your basket these days.
Yeah.
Double tap.
Buy it now and it's there.
Yeah, I can only imagine what their chargebacks must be.
It's everybody, even Amazon and all retailers around the world, based on recent reports, are seeing a downturn in consumers actually storing cards on file. Because they don't trust it anymore. Every week there's a horror story of this company being hacked. And these are, as we've seen the last week or two, these are high street names as well, where they lose data. That, you know, whereas when you pay in store, nothing is stored. The consumer is absolutely protected. You know, so you just, you know, the card details are never stored, they're never seen. So we're bringing that security for the consumer as well to online shopping.
You know why I think it's incredible? Because I said this to you off camera. When you've explained it and I've seen it and visualized it, it makes so much sense. And it's almost as if how hasn't it been here before? And I think that's just the sign of an incredible idea. I have to know, like, where did that come about? Because the ones before, you said it was through you doing something or like an actual experience. How do you think of that?
My mother-in-law. Okay. So it was during lockdown. And obviously half the world was cooped up in their house. And every Monday morning I'd have to ring her she could put things into a shopping basket, wouldn't check out. So I'd have to talk her through, because as you know, every single checkout page from most websites is different. They all look different. Some of them ask different questions. They want, issue numbers. And so I'd have to talk her through checking out, and my mother, every single Monday morning. And she'd always ask questions, what's these 3 digits for on the back of the card? Why do I need, to put in the address twice? Where's my details stored? Who can see them? I'm like, just type it in. And she always used to say, why can't I just tap my card on my phone like I do in the shop? So in theory, that's very simple. In practice, having invented the previous system where you can tap your card on a phone like in the shop, it's a completely different technical challenge, because there's about 120 million payment terminals in the world today, whereas there's 2 billion plus mobile phones. If you was to use the current system to plug in another, 1.1 or 2.1 billion devices, the banking system would crash. So we had to go right back to the drawing board and build and rebuild and redesign all the supporting systems and everything else, and reinvent, keep the same familiar user experience, but reinvent everything else, which is what we spent 2 years in a cold dark room before we launched CPI.
Does your mum know that story, that she was the idea behind this?
She was on the news, yes.
She was.
She was interviewed, yeah.
She's a shareholder in the business as well.
She'll do very well.
Yeah, sure, yeah. It's absolutely incredible. So what's to simplify it, what's the differences between CPOI, or why would a company want to use CPOI for their checkout versus not using CPOI?
2 issues. Let's just go back to booking.com again then. If I'm buying, if they have an order for 2 first-class flights to New York, £10,000, equally it could be a phone, it could be a watch, it could be your groceries. Because traditionally today the liability still sits with the merchant if it goes wrong, and fraud is rife. I mean, fraud is going up year on year on year. And if you look online, fraud and chargebacks are the biggest problem for merchants. 42 billion in e-commerce fraud last year alone. Plus, if you do get a chargeback, there's all the fees and the time that the merchant has to spend. They only win 20 to 30% of the chargeback, so they're trying to push something uphill in trying to win these cases in the first place. So if you can simply get somebody to tap their card and enter their PIN number and take away all of the fraud in a way that they already know how to use, then it's a no-brainer. They all want to stop the fraud. They all want to stop the chargebacks. So that's the two reasons why merchants are, globally now looking to deploy CPI.
Yeah. And we spoke off camera, and I've done a bit of research about false positives. Let's go into a bit of detail about that for people who would have no idea what a false positive is. Let's explain it first, and then how does CPI help that?
So a false positive is where the wonderful AI systems that are used to try and detect fraud by the financial institutions label transaction as fraudulent, and it's not. It's a genuine sale. So you've probably had it buying concert tickets, buying airline tickets, where you've got the money, the transaction won't go through. That's a false positive. When you're face-to-face, you can't get a false positive. There's only ever 3 questions asked if you buy something in store. Is the card okay? I.e., is it lost or stolen? Is it genuine? Yes. Is it Kieran? I.e., is the PIN number correct? Yes. Do you have the money? Yes. Make the sale. When you're shopping online, you can't tell if the card is genuine because it's just a number. I don't know if it's Kieran because I can't enter a PIN. So the AI has to guess. So they look at, and that's where online companies profile you. So it might say, look, Kieran's bought 3 pairs of trainers this week already. What does he need the 4th?
How did you know that?
Yeah. What does he need the 4th pay for? He hasn't shopped at this retailer before. He doesn't normally shop at this time of day. He's in Cardiff, not Newport. And there can be hundreds of things that it analyzes to come up with a decision as to whether it's fraudulent or not. And it's an educated guess, but it's a guess. That's a false positive when it says, no, it's fraud, when it's a genuine sale, which frustrates customers. As an example of the scale, as I said earlier, there was 42 billion lost in e-commerce fraud last year, huge number. But there's 440 billion lost last year in false positives, 10 times the cost of fraud. This equates to, on average, globally for merchants, to 7% of their revenue is lost through AI, which is a huge problem. You cannot get a false positive with CPI because essentially it's a face-to-face card-present transaction. So it eliminates that problem. So between the fraud and the false positives, it's a $500 million saving globally, plus other costs as well that can be saved. You don't need 3D Secure. There's less complexity with hosting costs and tokenization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So CPI, you can really see why you put that to the bottom line of most merchants. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, so money talks, and there'd be no reason really, if you've explained it like that, why a merchant wouldn't implement that. I guess anyone watching would be, who might be a merchant by chance, would be thinking, how easy is it to integrate CPI with my systems that I've got already?
So CPI is very easy to implement. We typically go through, at the minute, we're targeting larger merchants that have apps. It's almost a cut and paste exercise. You kind of drop some code into the app at the right place. Our technology is what's called an SDK, so it then gets embedded into the app and then just takes over the entire process. On the back end, this kind of financial system facing, we are completely transparent. So we look like a supermarket POS machine. That's the beauty of our technology. One simple change on the front, transparent on the back. For smaller merchants that might just operate via a web page, you can display a QR code. You can point your phone at the page, and then the transaction essentially jumps to your phone, and then you can check it on your phone as you would normally. So we cover all use cases.
So do you think merchants understand how big the problem is with false positives?
No. Bluntly, because if a merchant employs AI, and typically the industry standard is they employ 5 AI systems. The AI systems tell them that we've saved you from 10, 20 counts of fraud this week. 9 or 18 of those might have been genuine sales. So the merchants have no idea that they're losing revenue. And it gets even worse because then in 42% of cases, customers that have a false positive or a transaction refused off the site will never respond or never go back and shop at that merchant again.
It's true because I've done it.
So the lifetime value of that merchant loses from that customer, and then 1 in 3 will go on to social media, and then they lose brand reputation. So the cost is, is huge. Like I said, it's without the brand loss and everything else, it's 10 times the cost of fraud.
Yeah. So even me, who I've only heard about this piece of software recently, I can see it being everywhere. When do you think your piece of software that you've created is going to be out there for people who are watching, everyday people who are going to be using?
So we launched the solution in global launch in Usk, actually, about 6-7 weeks ago, which is where I live, hence the reason it was launched there. And we had CEOs and attendees from 19 different countries flew in from all around the world, China, South America, Canada, Washington, Indonesia, all over the place, to see the very first transaction. In fact, it was on BBC Wales, as we were talking about earlier, film live. So we are working now with infrastructure providers we've signed some key agreements with JPOS is one, Transactility is one software provider that their platform powers 95% of the banks, for instance, around the world. They provide the underlying payments infrastructure, so we're working with those to integrate the solutions so that when we do scale, and we're starting to talk to large merchants now and bring large merchants online now, we can scale very quickly, because this is something that everybody wants it now because of the problems of fraud and false positives. If you say to a merchant, look, we can stop your fraud and we can probably increase your revenue by 10%.
I'll take it.
Exactly.
Well, that's incredible that people are flying from all over the world to see the piece of software that you've built and thought of, or your mum thought of. How does it make you feel, in your hometown, people are coming to see the first transaction and you've built that?
It's good. It's just another, it was good for me having the family there, seeing the first transaction, because obviously my wife and my kids have kind of, even though it's been my journey for 20 plus years, it's been my wife's journey as well for 20 plus years, ups and downs, and the kids as well. It's kind of ruled my life and therefore has ruled their lives. So it was really good to have them there and for me to see the first one, and it worked.
And it worked. I was just about to say, in fact, did it work?
We've done 2.
Yeah.
We've done 2. And now we're looking at proof of concepts now with large and small companies across all verticals around the world, and you will see the next coming weeks and months a slew of announcements from us. I
can't wait till I can use the CPOI myself.
Yes,
on an online transaction.
It won't be long.
Yeah. So what's the roadmap for Burbank? Like, how far is this going? Is there an exit plan? Have you clearly identified that? If you're able to share, and just what's the longevity of this?
Look, it's going to grow and grow and grow over the next couple of years, because it's the technology as well as solving the fraud element online. The solution can also be deployed in other ways as well. So, for instance, it can be used to limit access to things online. So we are working with companies to limit access to gaming and gambling and adult content, so that unless you're of a certain age, you can't access this. We can deploy this in the medical industry and medical fraud in the US is bigger than payment fraud. And also insurance claims, because if you can just tap your card and enter your PIN number, categorically you can prove to the person on the other end of the phone that it's you, leveraging the bank's infrastructure. So this technology, while we started in the payments industry, because that's the area that I know, you can kind of, it's like SimCity, you can kind of cut and paste this, into other verticals very easily.
Yeah, so this can scale quite rapidly.
Yes.
But that comes with its challenges, right? There's the scalability. Is there anything that you've learned from previous businesses that we need to be aware of this when scaling so fast? Like, hold off, we can't onboard too many new clients. How does it work?
It's It's easier now because we've had the experience of doing it a couple of times previously. Testament to the good team as well. The team has done this numerous times, so there's nothing there that phases us. We are lucky that everybody wants to go forward with this as soon as possible. So we're not this time more than any time in the past. We're having some delays, but that's just timings of regulations and things which you can bend some rules, but you can't bend those. But everything else is we're on track, we're on plan, we're ahead of where we thought. And yeah, this will be available en masse by the end of the year, fingers crossed.
So that's 2 decades of, give or take, of experience in the payments industry. Surely you've learnt loads over the last Enet and MYHSM. Has there been any surprises in Burbank? Surely you can't run out of surprises when you're starting a startup.
Again, we've gone back to the challenges we had with Enet and with MyPinPad. The rules don't exist to do what we want to do, so we have to create them. But of course, it's slightly easier this time because the team have done it before. The team are known in the industry, so people are prepared to take a punt. Because we've done the hard yards with MyPinPad, with MYHSM, built a global platform with Enet. So it's easier, but there's still time challenges and the fact that it's global. I mean, everybody wants it from A to Z.
It's a good feeling, but it's almost roles reversed right now. Instead of going out to market, you've got people coming to you.
It is daunting, and we are going through we've got a very good channel partnership model where we don't necessarily sell directly to small to medium sized merchants. So we equip the acquirers and the large companies because all our technology is white label. So anybody can take it and then deploy their own product using our technology. So we purposely did it that way so that it's not just us rolling it out; it's us and everybody else rolling it out as well. So which is why we'll get the scale that we want within the time that we want.
Yeah. So you seem like a visionary. You seem like someone who's thinking forward, always creative with your ideas. Do you envision anything that's going to be difficult in the coming years with scaling this business and taking it to where you want to?
Nothing that I don't think that we can overcome. It's just it's just different at the minute. It's just new. The rules that's there at the minute don't take into account the use case that we want. The financial rules are very black and white. So we have to educate the schemes and everybody else. To scale this at mass. But to be fair, both Visa Card, MasterCard, and Amex and Discover have already made announcements last year that their direction of travel is to turn consumer mobile devices into payment devices. We're just going a lot faster than we're just going off the charts in terms of speed.
Yeah.
So it's while they made the announcements, they need to catch up with the thinking, because the global demand for this is huge. It's absolutely massive from many household names in the UK and around the world. So it's not going to be able to be stopped. So it's just they need to jump on the bus now and come along for the ride. Because everybody benefits apart from the fraudsters. And even indirectly, people for the first time ever now with CPOI, people can of a certain generation, like my mother-in-law, can shop online, whereas before they couldn't. So imagine online retailers now that all of a sudden could sell to these extra, generation that never normally do, or even companies that a lot of companies don't sell. Well-known companies don't sell in countries like Indonesia because massive levels of fraud. Well, now they can. So the market opens up to everybody, and there's now will just be one way to pay. Card present everywhere.
How exciting! Well, what about the competition in the payment space? Because I know there's lots of up-and-coming companies who are doing different things, whether it's payment authentication, solutions. Yours is overarching and different. It's going to affect everyone. Does it affect people that are still trying to innovate in the payment space, do you think?
No, there's still lots of innovation with lots of different payment types. We haven't invented a new payment type. That's probably the most important statement, actually. What we found is a way to scale the existing globally trusted method of card and PIN or chip and PIN. So we haven't invented a new way to pay, but we've found a way to make the existing way to pay seamless online at scale. That's what we've done. That's where the work has gone in and the money's gone into developing, because everybody already knows how to use it.
Incredible journey. I want to recap over the last 20 years, a few like quick fire questions, see if we can help anyone out listening. And yeah, just some curious questions from me actually. So did you always think that payments was the space you wanted to get into all those years ago, or
Yes,
not?
my university final degree paper was on payments, location-based payments. So right from day dot, it was payments.
Wow, you've had an articulated career for the last 20 years and you wanted to go in that direction.
Yep.
Incredible. Have you ever had any interest or desire to maybe move away from payments? Did something else, any other industry catch your attention at some point? I think, oh, do you know what? I could go into that.
No, actually. It's always been payments. I don't play golf. I'm bad at playing golf. So
Same.
as and when I retire, God knows what I'll do. But no, always been payments.
Yeah. And what's your thoughts on the AI revolution, AI hype? You know, there's lots of up and coming companies. What's your prediction of the next few years?
Look, I think AI is fantastic technology, game-changing technology in certain spheres, especially medical. You know, some of the breakthroughs now that's been achieved with cancer detection rates across the medical industry in general, developing new drugs, engineering and everything else. You can now ask your phone to do a picture of Mona Lisa eating a cheeseburger from McDonald's. I mean, you can have fun with it as well. And I think it has the potential to radically change a lot of jobs. But thankfully, it's not too good in the financial industry at the minute.
Do you see it affecting your specific niche or your career?
No, I mean it's a kind of a it's negative as a positive for us, because it's costing the industry so much money. Because payments is all about certainty. It's black or white, and chip and PIN delivers certainty. Yes, it's Kira, and yes, it's the card. When you shop online, AI, it guesses based on previous patterns and everything else. So if we can take that away and deliver certainty to online payments, as a consumer, why wouldn't you do it? And as a merchant, you would certainly do it.
Advice you've had along the way from investors, your very strong network. What's the worst bit of advice that you've had? And then is there any advice that has actually changed the way you think or changed your perspective on building a company?
That's a good question. Early days was, again, I'll repeat. I mean, investors always say you're going to need more money, take more money now. When you're young and naive with a new business, you think, nope, I'm not giving away 20% of the company when I can give away 10% of the company. It's only going to take me 12 months and I'm going to be profitable. 2 years later, you have to go back to the market, raise more money that was offered you at the start, probably for the worst price. So, investors generally are right. You always need, it always takes longer. It always costs more money. So advice to anybody raising money, bear that in mind. If you think you need one, you need two. If you think it's going to take a year, it's going to take two. Yeah, that's that. And people, just get a good team. Surround yourself with the best people that you can, and bring them along, for the journey with you.
And the way that you think is the best to do that is by offering skin in the game, shares.
Only if you know that they're the right people, then yes. We've something that we've always done, and it's always worked. Because you're only as good as the people behind you. And never be in a business, especially as a founder, that arrogant enough that you think that you know everything, because you don't.
True.
Always listen.
Final question from me then. Someone's watching this, they want to start a business, they've got the idea, on the fence about starting it. What's the first thing they should do?
Homework. Homework. I mean, you these days raising money, you have to know your market, you have to know your product, you have to know the fits, you have to know the competition. Investors are a lot more savvy these days. Prep work going into those can be the difference of getting investment at the rate that you want or not getting any investment at all. You know, so you really have to do your homework and make sure you have market fit.
And does homework include going out and speaking to potential customers?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just financial projections. I mean, it's going out and speaking to customers and suppliers and everybody really within that entire sphere, that industry that you're going into. Try and get everybody's perspective to make sure that you're a fit in the entire industry, not just niche.
Great advice. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you very much.
What a really interesting conversation with Justin Pike. He's been involved with some of the most creative ideas in the payments and authentication space over the last 20 years. And I think it's safe to say that the card present over internet solution is going to be coming to us all soon. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for our next episode.